Oh, hey, everybody. I'm just going to give you some of my background on cannabis and just a quick recording sharing some clips. So as I was focused on how do we end hunger, I suddenly, the legalization of cannabis in the state of Washington and Colorado, the first two states to legalize beyond medical usage. When that was happening, I was totally focused on how do we feed the world and everything. And then suddenly this huge opportunity came up to build a cannabis empire with multiple billions of dollars per year with profit. And anyway, here's a media company that did a thing on us when we were in Scotland at COP26, but focus on the words of Wolf Blitzer, CNN. Planetary overheating.
Vader turned out to be Jamin Shively, a former executive at Microsoft and an early advocate for and investor in legalized cannabis.
There's a high-powered new business venture in the works to create a national brand to sell, and want to be precise, to sell marijuana. It's the brainchild of a former Microsoft high executive and the former Mexican president, Vicente Fox.
The Berlin Wall of the prohibition of cannabis is weak.
For me, the question here is, will Shively turn out to be as prescient about geoengineering as he was about cannabis?
Okay, so that's just kind of a quick introduction. I built the first brand of premium cannabis with an amazing story, that of the legacy of my great-grandfather, Diego Pellicer. And here's like a little clip from National Geographic. There's my great-grandfather.
I've been referred to as the Bill Gates of bud. I'm jumping into what is effectively a $100 billion to $200 billion vacuum and building a giant brand out of it.
While the city
Anyway, I'll include that link. It's a nice little piece. There's a lot of, there's so much media coverage from back then, but the most important single inflection point in the whole journey was what I'll show you next, but it looks like I need to tweak it. Okay, it was a press conference that President Vicente Fox of Mexico and I did on May 30th, 2013. Here's a snippet.
Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Before I introduce our distinguished guests, I would like to begin with a quote from the late astrophysicist Carl Sagan. "The illegality of cannabis is outrageous, an impediment to full utilization of a plant which helps produce the serenity and insight, sensitivity and fellowship so desperately needed in this increasingly mad and dangerous world." Carl Sagan. But by making cannabis illegal, we have instead turned it into a tool for violence, exploited by criminals and organized crime.
So clearly, President Vicente Fox and I are taking aim at the, sorry, if I was muted. President Vicente Fox and I are taking aim at the criminal drug cartels, right? And then that becomes relevant a bit later. But first, let me show you the knockout punch delivered by President Fox at the press conference. But also look at the, actually how I introduce him is quite significant historically. Okay.
Next, it is my pleasure and profound honor to introduce to you a man who has dedicated his life to transforming his country and our world into a more peaceful, loving, and prosperous planet. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you the first freely elected president of Mexico, Señor Presidente.
Congratulations for that position. This state of Washington, has decided to lead a new path, a path to change the paradigm by legalizing medical and social use of cannabis. In Mexico, we welcome this initiative because the cost of the war, in the case of Mexico, is becoming unbearable. Too high for Mexico, Latin America, and the rest of the world. The impact in the economy, on income, on tourism investment, loss of talent, and above all, loss of hope, and 80,000 kids dead in the last 6 years.
So, here is a world leader, a foreign world leader who happens to be on a country that borders us, our biggest trading partner, comes to the United States at my invitation to denounce prohibition of cannabis and more generally the prohibition of drugs, which is killing us. In terms of the alternatives to prohibition, that's a deeper topic that's outside the scope of this video, but a very important one. Anyway, the bottom line is that what I just showed you and what I just said propelled this whole issue and our press conference right to President Obama's desk. And he took action within the internationally acceptable 3-month time window for cases of this magnitude. And they legalized cannabis. That's right. President Barack Obama legalized cannabis, not through a change in law, but through a change in policy. Because as we demanded in the press conference, you can watch the whole thing. We demanded the legalization of cannabis for all these reasons and pointed out that the US government was completely silent on the issue after Washington and Colorado had weighed in as states. And 6 months had elapsed and nothing, right? So boom, we put the screws on at exactly the right moment, and we got legalization through a change in policy, a change in federal policy, which was to let the states proceed. Prior to that, it was ambiguous. Prior to that press conference, it was ambiguous whether the federal government was going to let us proceed or not. They were treating us like a bunch of unwashed hippies, with machine guns. And along comes the Bill Gates of Bud, great-grandson of Diego Pellicer, and the rest is history. So it's all well-publicized history. And you can just look it up and just read for days about the whole thing. But among the parties who weighed in were the criminal drug cartels, and they did it through death threats against me and others, actual physical violence against me. And the death threats were very real and very intense. And so I went dark for a bit, regrouped with my dad, and, just spent the last couple of years of my dad's life with him, taking care of him, making sure he had a safe crossing to the other side, and reassuring him that we were going to end hunger one way or another, regardless of what happens with the drug cartels or whatever. Well, as it turns out, my dad, years earlier, had taken on the mafia in California that was building gambling casinos. They sent out a hitman to actually kill my dad. They were unsuccessful. That's another story. And my dad just carried on undaunted, injured, but undaunted. and he shut down a multi-billion-dollar casino that they were trying to build in our hometown. So bottom line, I had to figure out what I was going to do with all these death threats other than go dark. And so let me share a clip of, I started a movement to rid the state of Washington, for starters, with all the symbolic meaning, but we can do the same thing for Washington, D.C.
All right, a farewell song.
So here I am with my mom and my sister Betty, and you've literally, this was unintentional, but it just happened. The shadow of the giant statue of George Washington at the University of Washington in the state of Washington, standing right above my shoulder, Obi-Wan Kenobi style. But anyway, so here we are, and I'm just starting to say this is the farewell song to criminal drug cartels operating in the state of Washington. And I later took it all the way to, took this whole performance all the way to the Mexican border, California, Oregon, elsewhere, and it was, it's been quite successful. Okay, so here's just a snippet.
All right, a farewell song to the criminal drug cartels in the state of Washington. This is how we say bye-bye to the violent criminal drug cartels operating in our great state. Criminal drug cartels, criminal drug cartels will cut you down. You won't get up again, so you better get out of town. We'll cut you down. You won't get up again, so you better get out of town. We'll cut you down. You won't get up again, so you better get out of town. We'll cut you down. You won't get up again, so you better get out of town. Criminal drug cartels. Criminal drug cartels. They drink a whiskey drink. They drink a vodka drink. They drink a lager.
Anyway, just to give you a taste of that, and then at the end of that video, which I'll include a link here for, you can see a bunch of students getting into the dance, and it's just really beautiful. The criminal drug cartel, which had made the worst threats against me, we actually ran them out of the state of Washington, and I'm still alive. No death threats against me. I mean, no actual attempts at assassination, though clear threats have been made. Anyway, we went on to be nominated and receive the most nominations for Artist of the Decade at the University of Washington, where my mom had been May Queen, you know, many years earlier when she was a student there. And had the largest debate on a school night in memory at the University of Washington. We drew hundreds of people and had an amazing debate about the legalization of drugs. And it also provided kind of like an easy domino to knock over in terms of solving the world's problems. Eliminating first criminal drug cartels, then all forms of organized crime, and then third and finally, including organized crimes against Mother Earth. So the whole cannabis thing, it started with ending hunger, and it ended with, you know, taking on organized crime, including crimes against Mother Earth. And anyway, that's the background. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it.